The dust was an old friend, clinging to Alara's worn dress and the desperate hope that had driven her across the plains. She'd ridden for days, her heart a bruised thing in her chest, a marriage contract clutched in her hand. Not her contract, not anymore. This one was for Evelyn, her younger sister, signed by the same hand that had sold Alara off like a faulty wagon wheel just 6 months prior. Papa's word was currency in their small mountain holler, and his word, once given, had been for Alara to marry Isaac Thorne, the rancher's son, a man she'd never met. But then, a letter had arrived, curt and cold, dissolving the arrangement. No reason given, just a swift, brutal rejection. The shame had settled deep in her bones, a heavy cloak she couldn't shed. She dismounted near the Thorne ranch house, a grander place than anything she'd ever seen, but its prosperity only magnified her own ruin. Isaac Thorne, she'd learned from gossiping stagecoach passengers, was marrying Evelyn instead. Evelyn, who was younger, prettier, and hadn't carried the same weight of her father's disappointments. Alara's purpose here was vague, born of a desperate need to see her sister settled, to ensure she wasn't falling into the same kind of trap. Perhaps also a foolish, raw yearning to understand why she had been deemed so wholly unwanted. A man stepped from the shadowed porch. Not Isaac, but someone older, with eyes that held the wisdom of many seasons and a quiet strength that made her instinctively draw herself straighter. He was tall, his presence as solid as the ancient oaks that lined the distant riverbed. Silas Thorne, Isaac's father, his gaze, devoid of the judgment she'd come to expect, seemed to pierce straight through the layers of her shame, reaching the raw despair beneath. He didn't look away when her eyes met his, only held them, steady and deep. "You're Alara then," he said, his voice a low rumble, not unkind. "My son wrote to tell me of the change. He's a foolish boy, Alara. Not entirely without kindness, but blind in ways that matter." Her throat tightened. So, he knew. The whole town, likely. The humiliation clawed at her. "I came for Evelyn," she managed, the words thin, barely a whisper. "To see her wed." Silas Thorne nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "She's a good girl, Evelyn, but Isaac, he wasn't meant for you. You deserve more than a convenience girl or a last resort." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, not lingering on her worn clothes or the dust, but seeming to take in the quiet dignity she still clutched like a broken doll. "My son made a mistake, a big one, but this land, it needs a woman like you. Strong, resilient." He took a step closer, his shadow falling over her like a promise of shelter. "I need a wife, Alara, someone to stand beside me, to help make this place more than just a ranch, to make it a home. And I won't lie, your father's debt still stands with me, a substantial burden, but if you'd consider it, Alara, truly consider it, I'd wipe that debt clean, and I'd ask for nothing you weren't willing to give. I'll marry you, if you'll have me." The words hung in the oppressive quiet, startling her more than any shout. Marry him? The father of the man who had rejected her? The man who spoke of wiping away a debt she didn't know existed? A burden that now felt heavier than ever? This wasn't a proposal, it was a proposition. Yet his eyes held no trace of disrespect, only a strange, quiet offer of something she hadn't dared dream of: safety. Before we get into this tale of unexpected belonging and whispered promises, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And subscribe if you want more content like this one. Alara's mind reeled. The proposition was as bewildering as it was desperate. Silas Thorne's gaze, steady and unwavering, waited for her answer. It wasn't a proposal of love, not in the way the stories told it, but it was an offer of shelter in a world that had suddenly turned cruelly cold. Her father's debt. A fresh wave of shame washed over her. Papa always had his schemes, his promises, but this, to tie her very future to his recklessness, even in his absence, felt like the ultimate burden. She imagined her father in their small cabin, counting coins, utterly oblivious to the life he'd nearly ruined, the daughter he'd so carelessly cast aside. "My father, what debt?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. The heat of the midday sun seemed to press down on her, magnifying the confusion. Silas sighed, a low sound. "He borrowed against your hand, Alara. A substantial sum, to expand his acreage, he said. Promised your marriage to Isaac would settle it. When Isaac backed out, your father defaulted. He disappeared, leaving the debt and you behind. End of no. The revelation was a sharp, physical blow. Not only had she been rejected, she had been traded, then abandoned. The shame grew, not just for herself, but for her father, for the tangled web of his making. Her family was a broken thing, splintered by greed and indifference. He left? She whispered, the words tasting like ash. Yes, Silas confirmed, his voice gentle. Gone these past weeks. Evelyn is staying with a neighbor, Mrs. Miller, until the wedding. She knows nothing of this debt, or your father's departure, nor should she. She holds no blame. A flicker of protectiveness, fierce and unexpected, flared within Alara. Evelyn, innocent and sheltered, must not be touched by this squalor. Her sister deserved a clean beginning, and Silas Thorne's offer, however strange, seemed to be the only path that could provide it. If she married him, her father's debt would vanish. Evelyn's future would be secure, untouched by the shadows of their past. It was a choice born of desperation, certainly, but also of a fierce, desperate love for the sister she'd always tried to shield. Why me? She asked, a raw uncertainty in her voice. You could find someone else, someone whole. The word whole felt like a lie, a betrayal of the pieces she felt herself broken into. Silas stepped closer, his shadow stretching long over the dusty ground. Whole? He echoed softly, a slight smile touching his lips. Alara, no one is whole, not entirely. We all carry our scars, girl. Some are just more visible than others. He gestured to the vast, sprawling ranch. This land has known hardship. It's been broken and mended. It's seen lean years and bountiful ones. What it needs is someone with strength, with the quiet courage to see beyond the surface. Someone who understands what it means to build something new from fragments. His words were like a cool balm on her raw spirit. He wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for resilience. He saw past the rejection, the shame, the abandonment. He saw her. A strange, tentative connection formed in that moment. A fragile thread woven from desperation and a sudden, startling glimpse of kindness. He was not judging her, merely observing. He did not seek to exploit her helplessness, but to offer a choice. A profound, terrifying choice. Will you give me your word then, Ilara, that you will be a wife in name and a partner in this life? His eyes held hers, seeking not a passionate declaration, but a quiet, honest commitment. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fiery hues, but for Alara, a tiny, unfamiliar spark of hope flickered within the deepening twilight of her despair. She could not ruin Evelyn. She could not remain utterly unwanted. This was a chance, perhaps her only one, to build something new from the wreckage. The quiet yes that left Alara's lips was barely audible, a fragile whisper swallowed by the vastness of the prairie wind. But Silas Thorne heard it. He didn't smile broadly, or even offer a hand. Instead, he simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement that spoke of understanding and acceptance. Then, welcome home, Ilara, he said, his voice a low, steady promise. It was the first time in years she'd heard those words without a hollow echo of unfulfilled expectation. The next few days were a blur of hushed preparations and the daunting reality of her new life. There was no grand wedding, just a quiet ceremony performed by the circuit preacher, witnessed by Silas's few trusted ranch hands and, to Alara's immense relief, not Evelyn. Her sister was kept busy with Mrs. Miller, preparing for her own wedding. The deception felt like a heavy weight, but it was a burden Alara bore willingly, believing it shielded Evelyn from the truth of their father's abandonment and Alara's own desperate arrangement. Life on the Thorne Ranch was starkly different from anything Alara had known. Her days were filled with tasks, some familiar, some entirely new. Cooking for the hands, mending clothes, tending a small garden that was more dust than bloom. Silas treated her with a quiet, unwavering respect that chipped away at the layers of her suspicion. He never pressed, never probed. He offered her a space, a small measure of safety, that she hadn't realized she craved until it was given. He asked her opinions on small matters, listened intently, and often followed her suggestions. This quiet validation was a slow, steady kindling in her heart. Yet the town was a different matter. Whispers followed her like shadows. The rejected bride. The woman who married the father of the man who spurned her. The shame, which she had hoped to bury, resurfaced with every curious glance, every averted eye. During her rare trips into town for supplies, she felt the community judgment like a physical weight, a chill in the air even on the sunniest days. Mrs. Miller, a woman whose piety was as stiff as her starched collars, would offer thin-lipped greetings, her eyes sharp with disapproval. One afternoon, Evelyn visited the ranch, brimming with the excitement of her impending nuptials. She looked radiant, oblivious to the undercurrent swirling around Alara. "Isaac is so kind, Alara," Evelyn gushed, her face alight. "He's everything Papa said he'd be." Alara forced a smile, her heart twisting with a bittersweet mix of love and longing. She watched Evelyn, so young, so full of an untouched hope, and resolved again to keep the ugly truth hidden. Silas observed these interactions, his expression unreadable. One evening, as Alara sorted beans by the flickering lamplight, he spoke, his voice low. "The town will talk, Alara. They always do. But words are just wind. This place, this ranch, it's real. And what we build here, that's real too. It's hard," she admitted, her voice thin, "to feel, looked at, judged." He nodded. "Aye, but who are they to judge? A body can't choose their start, Alara, only their path forward. You chose this path, Alara, not out of weakness, but out of strength, to protect what matters." His words were a balm, affirming her choice, making the burden a little lighter. She realized then, with a jolt, that he saw her choice not as desperation, but as a deliberate act of will. He understood. This tentative connection, this shared space of quiet understanding, began to feel less like a fragile thread and more like a sturdy, growing root. For the first time in a long time, Alara felt a fleeting glimpse of safety, not just for Evelyn, but perhaps for herself. The tentative connection between Alara and Silas deepened in the weeks that followed, woven into the rhythm of ranch life. Their conversations were quiet, punctuated by comfortable silences, each word measured and meaningful. Silas was a man of few words, but each carried the weight of honesty. He showed her how to mend harnesses, how to identify different wildflowers, how to track the changing seasons in the vast expanse of the prairie. He never spoke of her past, never mentioned the rejection, yet his quiet presence was an invitation for her to share, should she choose. One evening, a fierce dust storm swept across the plains, tearing at the windows, making the old ranch house creak and groan. It mirrored the tempest raging within Alara. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and for the first time since she'd arrived, fear, deep and primal, settled in her chest. She found herself clutching her old worn shawl, a habit from childhood, when her father's drunken rages had been as unpredictable and destructive as any storm. "It's just the wind, Alara," Silas said, his voice cutting through the roar. He sat by the hearth, calmly mending a saddle strap, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos. "It brings back things," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper above the gale. The words tumbled out, a dam finally breaking. "My father, he wasn't always kind, especially when the liquor was in him. The rejections, they started young. Being told I wasn't enough, wasn't worth as much as the boys. Then he sold me to Isaac's father, like chattel. And then, Isaac, to be traded away again, unwanted. The shame, so long buried, surfaced raw and burning. He told me I was broken, Silas, not fit for a wife." Silas set down his tools, his gaze unwavering, compassionate. "Your father's words are not the truth, Alara. They are the scars of his own brokenness. And Isaac's rejection? It says more about his blindness than your worth." He paused, his eyes holding hers, not with pity, but with a profound understanding. "No one is broken, Alara. We are all marked by life, by hardship. It's what we do with those marks that matters. Do we let them define us? Or do we learn to carry them, to grow around them?" His kindness was a gentle hand on her bruised spirit. He didn't offer platitudes, he offered validation. In that moment, She understood something profound about Silas Thorne. He saw not a shattered woman, but one who had endured. He saw strength where others saw weakness. She felt a lightness in her chest, a lifting of the heavy burden she'd carried for so long. He also said I was too stubborn, she offered, a small, wry smile touching her lips. Not biddable enough for a man like Isaac. Silas chuckled, a rare, soft sound. Stubbornness can be a virtue, Alara. It's what keeps you standing when others would fall. It's what builds empires, not just houses. He looked at her then, truly looked, and Alara felt a warmth spread through her, unfamiliar but deeply comforting. She had taken an emotional risk, exposing a raw wound, and he had met it not with recoil, but with acceptance and a profound, quiet strength. It was a revelation. She was not defined by the rejections of her past, but by her enduring capacity to choose, to endure, to stand. Her scars, he seemed to say, were not flaws, but testament. With the dust storm gone, leaving the air washed clean and crisp, a new season seemed to settle over the ranch, mirroring the quiet shift within Alara. The emotional risk she had taken, revealing the depths of her past, had opened a door. Silas, true to his nature, didn't dwell on her confessions, but his understanding became a silent foundation beneath her feet. She began to truly belong, not just as his wife in name, but as an integral part of the ranch, a presence valued and respected. She found a quiet solace in the daily rhythm, in the familiar creak of the floorboards, the scent of fresh-baked bread, the low hum of the cattle in the distant pastures. The ranch hands, initially wary, slowly warmed to her. Young Jem, a gangly boy of 14, would often seek her out for stories, his eyes wide with admiration as she recounted tales of her mountain childhood, carefully omitting the darker parts. He mirrored her own childhood in some ways, a quiet soul yearning for stability. It was in these small interactions that Alara truly felt the slow mending begin, a healing that came not from solitude but from connection. Evelyn's wedding day arrived, a bright sunny affair that felt almost surreal against the backdrop of Alara's quiet life. Alara dressed with care, a simple, serviceable gown Silas had bought for her, its newness a stark contrast to her worn travel dress. She felt a pang of protectiveness as she watched Evelyn, so innocently joyful, marry Isaac Thorne. He was handsome, certainly, but his eyes held a certain guardedness, a lack of the quiet depth Alara had come to appreciate in his father. During the reception, as the fiddles played and the laughter swelled, Alara found herself observing the Thornes, father and son. Isaac held Evelyn's hand possessively, a proud grin on his face. He seemed to see Evelyn as a possession, a pretty wife to complete his image. Silas, however, watched Alara from across the room, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips when her gaze met his. There was no possessiveness in his look, only a quiet acknowledgement, a shared understanding that transcended the boisterous celebration. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a reflection of his own status or a solution to a problem, but as herself. Later that evening, after Evelyn and Isaac had departed for their new home, Alara found Silas on the porch, watching the stars bloom across the vast, ink-dark sky. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and damp earth. "She'll be happy," Alara said, breaking the silence, her voice soft. "She deserves it," Silas replied, his gaze still on the constellations. Then he turned to her. "And so do you, Alara." His words were not a question, but a quiet affirmation. "You've brought something to this place, a quiet strength, a belonging." Alara felt her throat tighten. Belonging. The word resonated deep within her, a long-forgotten melody. She had never truly felt it before, not with her father, who saw her as a transaction, not even with Evelyn, for whom she was always the protector, the silent observer. But here, with Silas, in this quiet, sturdy home, she felt it. A sense of being rooted, valued, and finally truly safe. The scars were still there, but they no longer felt like a burden. They were part of her story, and for the first time, she felt someone truly understood that story. The quiet peace that had settled over the Thorne Ranch was fragile, like thin ice on a winter pond. It was a peace Alara had learned to cherish, a sense of belonging that had woven itself into the very fabric of her days. But the western lands, like life itself, were unpredictable, and peace rarely lasted without challenge. The first tremor came in the form of gossip, whispered like venom through the small town. Mrs. Miller, the stiff-backed woman from Evelyn's wedding, became an unwelcome fixture. Her visits to town suspiciously timed with Alara's. Her eyes, usually sharp with disapproval, now held a glint of something colder, more calculating. She spoke in veiled allusions, hinting at Alara's past, stirring the pot of community judgment that had never truly stopped simmering. Then came the letters. Not for Alara, but for Silas. Official-looking documents with curt, legalistic language. Silas read them with a frown, his jaw tight. He never spoke of their contents directly, but Alara sensed a growing tension in him. His silences became heavier, his gazes out across the fields more worried. One afternoon, a rider galloped into the yard, stirring a cloud of dust that seemed to choke the air. It was Isaac Thorne, his face flushed with anger, his eyes narrowed. He dismounted abruptly, his gaze sweeping over Alara with a sneer. "So, you've settled in, have you?" he spat, addressing Alara, not Silas. "Made yourself comfortable on my father's generosity." His voice was laced with a resentment that surprised Alara. She hadn't realized her presence had bothered him so much. Silas stepped forward, his voice a low, warning rumble. "Isaac, mind your tongue." "Why should I, father?" Isaac retorted, his voice rising. "Word is, the bank's calling in Papa's note. They're saying this ranch is in trouble. And all because you insisted on paying off a mountain family's debts to marry a cast-off." He looked at Alara, his lips curling in disgust. "You are nothing but trouble from the start, a burden Papa didn't need." The accusation hit Alara with the force of a physical blow. A burden. The word echoed her father's own quiet condemnations, the root of her deepest shame. Was this what Silas felt too? Had his kindness been a front for an act of charity that was now ruining him? Her mind raced, the fragile peace shattering around her. The ranch, Silas's home, was in danger, and Isaac was blaming her. This was the external threat, stark and unforgiving. Silas's hand went to Isaac's shoulder, his grip firm. "That's enough. This has nothing to do with Alara." "Doesn't it?" Isaac scoffed, shrugging off his father's hand. "The bank's loan was secured by a promise of a profitable marriage, a union with a family of good standing. You married her instead. The daughter of a debtor, a man who abandoned his obligations. The community is talking, father. They say you've made a poor choice. And now the bank sees it too. They want their money, or they'll take the land." Alara felt cold dread spread through her. The moral tension between freedom and belonging, between her past and her precarious present, suddenly intensified. She was not just a rejected bride, she was a harbinger of ruin. The quiet win of finding belonging felt perilously close to being undone. This was the threat, stark and undeniable, jeopardizing everything. The security, the tentative safety she had found, felt as fleeting as a summer cloud. Isaac's words hung in the air, thick with accusation and the stench of implied failure. The news of the bank's call-in was a chilling reality, a direct threat to the fragile peace Alara had found. A burden. The word twisted in her gut, resurrecting old wounds. She watched Silas, her heart pounding with a desperate fear. Was this it? Was her past finally catching up, proving her father's words right? That she was, indeed, too much trouble, too damaged, too great a burden to be truly wanted? Silas's face, usually so composed, was etched with worry, but his gaze, when it found hers, held no accusation, only a deep, quiet understanding. "This is not your fault, Alara," he said, his voice firm, overriding Isaac's bitter pronouncements. "My investments were tied to a bad season, and my own pride. I will deal with the bank." But Alara saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the tightening of his lips. He was carrying a heavy weight, and she feared she was adding to it. That night, she lay awake, the wind outside echoing the turmoil within her. What if she left? Simply disappeared, like her father had. Wouldn't that ease Silas's burden? Her presence was seen as a weakness, a reason for the community's judgment, and now, a catalyst for financial ruin. This wasn't a sacrifice, it was a necessary withdrawal. Her desperation to protect Silas, to preserve the kindness he had shown her, was mistaken for weakness, for a return to her old patterns of retreat. The next morning, as the sun painted the eastern sky with pale light, she found Silas in the barn, harnessing a team of horses. He looked tired, his movements slower than usual. "I'm riding to town," he said, not looking at her, "to speak with the banker, and to tell Mrs. Miller to curb her tongue." Ilara felt a sudden surge of fear. "Don't," she said, the word raw. "It will only make things worse. I can leave, Silas. The debt, the rumors, they'll fade. You can find someone else. Someone who isn't a liability." He stopped, his hand pausing on a leather strap, and turned to face her. His eyes, usually so calm, held a rare intensity. "Leave?" he repeated, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "Is that what you think I want? You think you're a liability, Ilara? You're not." He took a step towards her, his presence solid, unwavering. "You were not the cause of this, Ilara. My decisions are my own, and my choice to have you here, was not a mistake. It was the right choice. The only choice." His words, simple and direct, cut through her self-doubt, striking a chord deep within her. He wasn't just defending her from Isaac or the town. He was defending his choice to have her, validating her very presence. The loyalty he showed, a quiet, fierce dedication, filled the empty spaces in her heart. He was not letting her run. He was anchoring her. "But the bank," she began, still caught in the spiral of fear. "We will find a way," he interrupted, his voice resolute. "Together. Do you trust me, Ilara? To stand by you, to face this? To make this home, no matter what judgment the world throws at us?" The question hung between them, not just about the bank, but about their tentative, unconventional marriage. It was a test of loyalty, a moment of profound choice. She saw the unwavering trust in his eyes, a mirroring of the hope he was asking her to place in him. Her desperation, the need to protect him, melted away, replaced by a fierce resolve. She wouldn't run, she would stand. She would choose him, just as he had chosen her. Ilara's yes was not a whisper this time, but a firm, quiet affirmation. It was a promise of loyalty, a commitment forged in the crucible of fear and uncertainty. She trusted him. More than that, she believed him. His unwavering choice to stand by her, even when it put his own world at risk, was the kind of affirmation she had never dared to dream of. It was not a heroic triumph, but a quiet, powerful win. The choice to stay, to fight, to belong. The next few days were taut with tension. Silas spent long hours poring over ledgers, making calculations, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ilara watched him, a knot of worry in her stomach, but also a growing resolve. She would not be a passive observer. She would be a partner, as he had promised. One afternoon, she found him staring out over the vast, empty fields, a sigh escaping his lips. "It's difficult, Ilara," he admitted, his voice low. "The prices are down, the winter was hard. The bank wants their money, and with Isaac married, he's less inclined to help." Ilara stepped beside him, her gaze sweeping over the land she had come to think of as home. "What if we sold some of the livestock?" she suggested, her voice hesitant. "Just enough to make a dent. Or what if we planted something new, something hardy that can withstand the lean years?" Her mind, honed by years of making do, began to see possibilities. Silas turned, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by a thoughtful gaze. "Selling livestock is a last resort. But planting, what did you have in mind?" She told him of the hardy grains her grandfather had grown in the mountains, crops that thrived in poorer soil and fetched a good price. She spoke of her knowledge of preserving, of stretching meager supplies, of turning humble ingredients into something nourishing. She saw the subtle shift in his posture, the slight easing of his shoulders. She wasn't just a burden, she was a source of ideas, of quiet strength. The affirmation came not in words, but in action. That evening, Silas gathered his ranch hands. "We're making some changes," he announced, his voice steady. "Ilara has some ideas for new crops, and we'll be tightening our belts. Every hand, every dime counts." He looked at Ilara, a subtle nod, a shared understanding passing between them. He had publicly acknowledged her contribution, given weight to her voice. Later, he found her in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread, her hands strong and capable. He watched her for a moment, then spoke, his voice low. "You understand this land, Elara. You see its potential, even when it looks barren. And you see people that way, too, don't you?" She looked up, a soft blush rising to her cheeks. I want to help." He reached out, his hand gently covering hers on the flour-dusted countertop. His touch was warm, comforting. "You do help, Elara, more than you know. You've brought something essential to this place, something I didn't realize was missing. Hope." His grip tightened slightly, a silent promise. "We will get through this. Together." It was a quiet moment, brimming with unspoken affection and renewed purpose. The scars of her past still lingered, but they were no longer a testament to what she had lost, but to what she had endured, and what she was now building. This sense of shared purpose, of together, solidified her belonging more deeply than any ceremony ever could. The banker, Mr. Henderson, arrived a week later, a plump man with a self-important air and a ledger clutched tightly in his hand. He was accompanied by Mrs. Miller, who seemed to relish the opportunity to witness Silas Thorne's downfall and, more importantly, Elara's public shaming. They stood in the ranch house parlor, the sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like silent witnesses. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson began, his voice dripping with condescension, "we have a simple matter to conclude. The terms of your loan are clear. The full amount is due, and, given certain recent developments in your personal affairs, our board is unwilling to extend further credit." His gaze flickered pointedly at Elara, then back to Silas, a smug satisfaction on his face. He was clearly influenced by the town gossip, making her past a weapon against Silas. Silas stood tall, his presence unwavering. "I understand the terms, Mr. Henderson, and I intend to honor them." He gestured to a small pile of sacks on a nearby table. "This is the first installment. Payment in full, plus a small premium for your inconvenience." Henderson scoffed. "A partial payment? That won't do, sir. We require the entire sum, unless you're offering us the title to your land, or perhaps a more substantial asset." His eyes again flickered to Elara, a clear, insulting implication in his gaze. Elara felt a hot flush rise to her cheeks. The audacity, the public shaming, the suggestion that she was Silas's asset to be traded, it all stung fiercely. She clenched her hands, fighting the urge to flee. But then she remembered Silas's words, his steady gaze, his unwavering choice. She was not a burden, she was a partner. Before Silas could speak, Elara stepped forward, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor she felt within. "Mr. Henderson, this land is not merely an asset, it is a home, and what happens here, financially or otherwise, is a matter of hard work and honest dealings. Mr. Thorne has diversified his crops. We anticipate a strong harvest this season, and we have liquidated assets to demonstrate our commitment." She pointed to a stack of fresh bills beneath the sacks. "The livestock sold for more than expected, and we've scaled back our expenses. This is not a partial payment, sir. It is a commitment, a promise of solvency, and a reflection of our integrity." Silas looked at her, a profound gratitude in his eyes. He had known she was resilient, but her quiet courage in the face of such blatant disrespect was truly remarkable. Mrs. Miller gasped, clearly unprepared for Elara's directness. Henderson, visibly flustered by Elara's unexpected interjection and her clear-eyed assessment of the situation, stammered, "Well, the board, this is highly irregular. The board is interested in their money, Mr. Henderson." Silas interjected smoothly, taking over from Elara, a quiet pride in his voice. "And we are offering it in a sound and solvent manner. I suggest you accept this payment and reassess your terms." The confrontation ended with Henderson, defeated, accepting the payment and agreeing to review the remaining debt in 6 months, clearly swayed by Elara's unexpected demonstration of competence and Silas's firm resolve. Mrs. Miller, her face a mask of disappointment, departed quickly. It was a quiet win, not a heroic triumph, but a powerful affirmation of their strength as a unit. Elara had not only defended Silas, but she had defended herself, demonstrating that she was not broken, and her desperation had indeed been mistaken for weakness. She had stood firm, choosing to stay, protecting the future they were building together. The confrontation with the banker, a quiet victory born of shared resolve, cemented Ilara's place on the Thorn Ranch. The town's whispers didn't cease entirely, but they diminished, replaced by a grudging respect for Silas Thorne's tenacity and Ilara's surprising strength. She no longer felt the burning shame of the past. It was a distant scar, visible but no longer defining. Her life, like the land itself, had weathered a harsh winter and was now entering a season of hard-won growth. The new crops, the hardy grains Ilara had suggested, thrived under the prairie sun, a testament to her foresight and the land's enduring promise. The ranch began to prosper, slowly, steadily, like a deep-rooted tree reaching for the sky after a long drought. Silas and Ilara worked side by side, their movements synchronized, their conversations often unspoken, a quiet understanding flowing between them. One crisp autumn evening, after the last of the harvest had been brought in, they sat on the porch, watching the vast, star-strewn sky. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and drying hay. A sense of profound peace settled over Ilara, a quiet satisfaction that resonated deep within her. The scars of her past, the abandonment, the rejection, the feeling of being unwanted were still there, etched into her memory, but they no longer felt like a burden. They were part of her story, part of the woman she had become. "The bank sent a letter," Silas said, breaking the comfortable silence. His voice was soft, content. "The remainder of the debt is settled. No more threats." Ilara turned to him, a smile blossoming on her face, bright and true. "That's good, Silas. Very good." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "It is, and so are we, Ilara." His gaze held hers, a profound affection shining in his eyes. "You brought more than just good ideas to this place. You brought a heart, a home." She leaned into his touch, her own heart overflowing with a bittersweet contentment. It wasn't the grand love story of dime novels, no sweeping declarations or passionate embraces. It was something deeper, more enduring, a love built on quiet kindness, shared burdens, unwavering trust, and the profound choice to belong. They were two broken individuals, not made whole by a magical cure, but mended together, stronger in their shared vulnerability. She thought of Evelyn, happily married, living a life untouched by the shadows that had followed Ilara. Evelyn, who still believed in perfect stories. Ilara's story was different. It was messy, marked by pain and hardship, but it was also filled with resilience, quiet dignity, and a love that had grown from the barren soil of despair. The coyotes howled in the distance, a haunting sound that used to stir fear in her, but now felt like a part of the wild beauty of the land she had come to call home. She was not broken. She was mended, intricately and lovingly. Her healing was a testament to the power of human connection, of finding safety and acceptance in an unexpected place, with a man who saw past the surface, past the shame, to the quiet strength within her. This was her peace, hard-won and deeply cherished, a quiet resolution in the vast, hopeful expanse of the western sky.